I never thought betrayal would sneak into my life quietly, like a draft slipping under the door of a warm room. Movies and novels always dressed infidelity in neon signs, lipstick on collars, suspicious text messages left open on a nightstand. But reality, I learned, was far more insidious. It started with little things. I live in Portland, Oregon. A city of rain-washed streets, coffee shops on every corner, bridges stretching like steel veins across the Willamette. The kind of place where people wear beanies in summer and discuss craft beer as if it were religion. For me, Portland was a canvas of stability. I worked as a logistics manager for a shipping company, steady 9 to 5, weekends free. My wife, Emily, worked in graphic design, remote most days, laptop glowing on the kitchen table. Emily. She was 32, though she still carried the brightness of her 20s. Shoulder-length brown hair, eyes like storm clouds about to break, and a laugh that made people turn their heads in crowded rooms. We had been married 7 years, and like all couples, we had our routines. Saturday morning farmers markets. Wednesday pasta night. Netflix binges on rainy Sundays with a blanket pulled over our legs. But routines can become shadows. The first flicker came one Thursday evening. I got home later than usual, the sky outside already dim with the early onset of Portland winter. Rain glazed the sidewalks, reflecting the city lights like shards of glass. When I opened the door, the house smelled faintly of wine, red, earthy, and something floral, not quite her usual perfume. Emily was sitting on the couch, laptop open but dark, her phone face down beside her. She looked up with that startled expression, like I'd caught her mid-sentence in a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. "You're home early," she said. "It's 7:30. I tried to smile, but her eyes darted to the phone before she picked it up and slid it into her pocket. A small thing, but it rooted in my chest. We ate dinner together, leftover Thai takeout. She talked about fonts, about a new project with a client in Seattle. I nodded in the right places, but my mind circled that phone, that look in her eyes. When she went to bed early, claiming a headache, I sat in the dark living room, listening to the rain hammer against the windows. That was the first night suspicion whispered to me. The next few weeks slipped by like rain down a windshield, steady, constant, blurring the edges of what I thought I knew. Life went on in appearances. Work. Dinner. Sleep. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. I started noticing little things, things I never used to think twice about. Emily's phone was always near her. Before, she'd leave it on the kitchen counter, screen lighting up with texts from friends, Instagram notifications, the occasional email. Now, it was either face down or in her pocket. She'd step out of the room to take certain calls, her voice lowered, laughter tucked into her sleeve like it was a secret. One evening, while she showered, I picked up her phone from the nightstand. My hands felt heavy, as if I were crossing a line I couldn't return from. It was locked, of course. She had added a passcode. That hadn't been there 6 months ago. My reflection stared back at me in the black screen, and I hated the man I saw, paranoid, desperate, suspicious. I set it down before she came out, heart pounding like I'd just stolen something. Portland in December was all rain and gray skies, the kind that seep into your bones. The city felt heavier, colder. Maybe it was me projecting. At work, I found myself distracted. Numbers on spreadsheets blurred, coworkers' voices sounded far away. My boss, a practical man named Carl, pulled me aside one Friday. "Everything all right at home?" he asked. "Yeah. Fine." He gave me that look, part skepticism, part concern, but didn't push. That night, Emily suggested we go out for drinks. We hadn't done that in a while. She wore a red dress, one I hadn't seen in years, and when she spun in front of the mirror, she smiled like the woman I fell in love with. We went downtown, to a bar with Edison bulbs hanging low and bartenders who knew how to make cocktails that looked like art. For a few hours, it felt normal again. We laughed. We touched knees under the table. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I convinced myself maybe I was wrong, maybe it was just work stress, maybe she really had nothing to hide. Then her phone buzzed. Her body stiffened almost imperceptibly. She pulled it from her clutch, glanced at the screen, and slid it back without answering. I caught the name, just the first letter, M. Her smile didn't quite return after that. Later that night, when she fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling. The sound of rain tapping the windows was relentless. My chest ached with questions I couldn't voice. Who was M? Why did her laughter sound different on those phone calls? And why did I feel like a stranger in my own marriage? Saturday mornings used to be our ritual. Coffee at the farmer's market, strolling between stalls of fresh apples and hand-poured candles, talking about nothing and everything. That Saturday, the market buzzed with people wrapped in scarves, steam curling from paper cups. Emily walked beside me, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat, eyes scanning the crowd instead of meeting mine. We bought pears, bread, and a bouquet of sunflowers she said would brighten the kitchen. But the silence between us weighed more than the bags in my hands. At one point, she excused herself to the restroom. I watched her weave through the crowd, then stopped suddenly near the food trucks. She pulled out her phone, turned slightly away, and smiled in that private way that used to belong only to me. I couldn't hear her words, but I didn't need to. Something in the tilt of her head, the softness in her expression, told me it wasn't her mother she was talking to, or a client from Seattle. When she returned, she slipped her arm into mine, but it felt forced, like someone trying to remember how affection should look. That night, after she fell asleep, I couldn't help myself. I got out of bed, careful not to wake her, and padded down the hallway into the living room. Her purse sat on the chair, and her phone was inside. Still locked. The passcode barrier stared back at me, an invisible wall. I sat there in the dark, phone in hand, heart pounding. I thought about trying to guess her code, her birthday, our anniversary, even the name of her sister. But some line in me refused to cross all the way. I put the phone back. Instead, I opened her laptop on the kitchen table. No password. Relief washed over me, until I realized she was cleverer than I gave her credit for. The browser history was too clean. Emails were empty of anything personal. Almost as if she had curated it, anticipating my suspicion. I closed it with a quiet click and stared at my reflection in the black screen. I was becoming a detective in my own house. Sunday, the weather broke for a few hours, sunlight piercing through the gray like a reprieve. Emily suggested we take a walk along the riverfront. We bought lattes from a vendor cart and strolled past joggers and families with kids on scooters. She talked about a design project, about typography and color palettes, her voice animated. For a moment it was easy to believe nothing was wrong. But then her phone vibrated again. She glanced at it, tucked it quickly back in her coat, and her eyes shifted away. I stopped walking. Who keeps texting you? I asked. Her body tensed, just slightly. Just a client. Seattle. Deadlines, you know how it is. Then why can't you answer in front of me? Her lips parted, then pressed into a thin line. She met my gaze, her storm cloud eyes hardening. Because I don't like feeling watched, Daniel. I don't owe you every second of my life. The words cut. We walked home in silence after that, the river glinting cold beside us. That night, lying in bed, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was sure. And certainty hurt worse than doubt. Monday morning came wrapped in drizzle, the kind that never quite stops in Portland, just lingers like a damp shadow. Emily left earlier than usual, claiming she had a meeting downtown. That alone was strange, her job rarely required her to leave the house. I decided to follow. Not openly, Not like in movies where the husband tails his wife in a trench coat. I waited 20 minutes, then got in my car and drove toward downtown. The streets were slick, neon signs reflecting off the pavement. I spotted her gray Subaru parked near a cafe on Burnside. Through the rain-smeared window, I saw her inside, not with a laptop, not alone. She was sitting across from a man. Tall, maybe mid-30s, with a clean-shaven jaw and a suit that didn't belong to this city's casual culture. He leaned toward her, his hand brushing hers on the table. She laughed, soft, familiar, the laugh that once belonged only to me. I sat in my car until my fingers dug into the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. When she finally left, I didn't confront her. I drove home, the rain blurring everything until I wasn't sure if the wetness on my face was weather or something else. That night, I tried to act normal. She cooked pasta, poured wine, and asked about my day. I stared at her hands, those same hands that had brushed his. "Who is he?" I asked finally, my voice low. Her fork paused mid-air. "What?" "The man at the cafe." She froze. Just for a second, but enough. Then she laughed, too quickly. "Daniel, are you following me now?" You didn't answer. Her storm-gray eyes locked on mine. It was a client. Nothing more. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the silence after her words stretched too long. Over the next 2 weeks, her schedule began to shift. Late night, client calls. Early morning, meetings. She started dressing differently, more carefully, makeup when she never used to bother, dresses pulled from the back of the closet. One Thursday, she claimed she was meeting a colleague for drinks. I waited until she left, then followed again. This time to a hotel bar, dimly lit, glass walls reflecting the city's glow. He was there. They sat close, their knees almost touching. He whispered something, and she leaned in, her smile glowing like I hadn't seen in months. I watched them clink glasses, his hand brushing her thigh, and my stomach turned cold. I didn't go inside. I didn't storm over. I just stood in the rain, watching the woman I loved belong to someone else. When she returned home hours later, she smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't hers. "Long night?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. "Yeah," she said, eyes averted. "Deadlines." I nodded, biting my tongue until I tasted blood. Suspicion turned into obsession. I started noticing patterns, the way her phone always buzzed around 9 p.m., the nights she worked late, but came home with her hair slightly tousled, the faint traces of perfume that weren't hers clinging to her clothes. One night, when she showered, I checked her purse. Inside was a hotel key card. The name embossed, the Hawthorne Suites. My chest tightened. The next day, during lunch break, I drove there. The lobby smelled of polished wood and expensive coffee. My hands shook as I asked the receptionist if an Emily Carter was a guest. She glanced at the computer. "No, sir. Not registered here." But I knew. I knew she didn't need to be registered to have a key card. When I drove back to work, the rain turned into a downpour. Wipers beat furiously across the windshield, but nothing cleared the storm building inside me. That night, Emily curled against me in bed, whispering, "I love you," before drifting to sleep. I stared at the ceiling. The words used to mean something. Now, they felt like lies dressed as lullabies. The confrontation came on a Friday night. We were eating takeout, Thai again, though it tasted like ash in my mouth. Her phone buzzed, and she smiled before silencing it. Something inside me snapped. "Who is he?" I demanded. Her fork froze. "Daniel. Don't lie to me. The man at the hotel, the bar, the cafe. Who is he?" Color drained from her face. She set down her fork slowly. "You've been following me?" I've been watching my wife disappear in front of me. And yes, I saw you with him. Silence stretched. Finally, she whispered, his name is Michael. She stopped herself, biting her lip. He's what? My voice was raw. A mistake. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. The room seemed to tilt. My chest ached, my throat tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse. I stood, pacing the kitchen, fists clenching and unclenching. How long? She didn't answer. Which was answer enough. After she said his name, the air in our kitchen became unbreathable. Michael. A simple word, but it cracked everything we had built. Emily tried to explain, her voice low, trembling. It wasn't supposed to happen. He's just someone I met through work. It started small. Coffee, conversations. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Her words blurred. All I could hear was betrayal woven into every syllable. How long? I asked again, my voice breaking. She lowered her eyes. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of laughter given to another man while I sat across from her at our dinner table, believing we were still us. I walked out. Rain pelted the streets, soaking me to the bone, but I welcomed it. At least the storm outside matched the one inside. The days that followed felt unreal. Emily moved carefully around me, as if I were made of glass. She still cooked, still folded laundry, still smiled at me like nothing had changed. But her eyes betrayed her. I began sleeping on the couch. The bed felt poisoned, sheets tangled with ghosts I couldn't name. At work, I functioned on autopilot. Numbers, shipments, deadlines, none of it mattered. My co-workers noticed, whispered behind my back. Carl pulled me aside again, but this time I just shrugged. At night, when Emily went to bed, I sat in the dark living room, listening to the hum of the fridge and the distant hiss of rain. I kept thinking, this is what strangers feel like. Two people in the same house, bound by routine but nothing else. I couldn't let it go. I needed to know who Michael was. I started searching. Social media, LinkedIn, every corner of the internet. Finally, I found him, Michael Turner. 35. Marketing consultant. Recently relocated to Portland from Seattle. His profile photo showed him on a hiking trail, grinning at the camera like he had everything he wanted. I memorized his face. One evening, Emily left for another client meeting. I followed her again. She met him at a different hotel this time. I watched them from the parking lot, my fists trembling on the steering wheel. He touched her lower back as they walked inside, as if she belonged to him. In that moment, I hated him more than I thought possible. But I hated myself more. For letting it happen, for watching instead of acting. We finally spoke again. It was late, the house silent except for the ticking clock. Emily sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she never drank. "Daniel, I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know what else to say. I don't want to lose you." Her words twisted in me. "You already did." She flinched, but didn't argue. I stared at her, searching for the woman I married. The one who used to sneak me notes at work, who danced with me in the living room on nights when we couldn't afford to go out. I couldn't find her anymore. She was buried under lies, replaced by someone who belonged to Michael. That night, I dreamed of her laughing. Not with me, but with him. I woke drenched in sweat, the sound of her voice echoing like a ghost I couldn't exorcise. Something inside me shifted after that. I stopped asking questions. Stopped confronting. Stopped pretending. On the outside, I was calm. On the inside, I was planning. Emily seemed relieved by my silence, mistaking it for acceptance. But it wasn't. It was the silence of a man walking toward the edge, waiting for the right moment to jump, or to push someone else off. I began watching Michael more closely. His office. His routine. The places he liked to drink after work. The city kept raining, washing over Portland like it wanted to erase everything. But some stains don't wash out. Some only deepen. The night it ended began like any other. Rain against the windows, the dull glow of the kitchen light. Emily cooked salmon, poured wine, tried to carry on a conversation as if nothing stood between us. But I had already decided. When she placed the plate in front of me, I slid a folder onto the table. Inside, divorce papers. Her eyes froze on them, her breath catching. "Daniel, what is this?" "You know what it is," I said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I had cried enough for both of us. "I thought," she began, but her voice broke. "You thought I'd forgive. Forget. Pretend Michael never existed." I leaned forward, my voice steady now. "But every time I look at you, I see him. Every lie, every night you spent with him while I sat here believing in us." She shook her head, trembling. "Please, I can stop. I'll end it. We can fix this." "No, Emily." I pushed the folder toward her. "We're already broken." The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, signatures, dividing up lives that had once been whole. Furniture, bank accounts, even who would keep the damn coffee maker. At night, the house grew emptier. Her clothes disappeared from the closet, her books vanished from the shelves. I walked past hollow spaces that used to be filled with her, and the silence pressed in. She tried, once, to plead again. Standing in the doorway, her eyes red, voice raw. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. I stared at her, searching for truth. Maybe some part of her did love me. But love without loyalty is just another form of cruelty. "You loved him more," I said. And I closed the door. The day we signed, Portland gave us one of those rare afternoons of sunlight. Almost cruel, like the sky mocking the moment. We sat in a lawyer's office, signing away 7 years with black ink. Emily's hand shook as she wrote her name. Mine didn't. When it was done, she looked at me one last time. Not with anger, not with excuses, just sorrow. "Goodbye, Daniel." I nodded. "Goodbye." And that was it. The end of us. The house feels different now. Quiet, yes, but also lighter. The ghosts are gone. I still think of her, of course. I still see her in the curve of a wine glass, in the sound of laughter drifting from strangers on the street. But those memories don't cut as deeply anymore. They remind me of what I survived. Portland rains again tonight. I sit by the window, watching the water streak down the glass, and for the first time in months, I can breathe. Sometimes survival doesn't look like victory. Sometimes it looks like signing your name on a line, walking away, and letting the rain wash over what's left. And maybe, just maybe, it looks like a man ready to begin again.